Okay, we are going to get started. It is 2:30. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ashley Ferraro, the Assistant Director for the Office of Global Learning and Partnerships. Today, I have Dr. Jason Scorza, who is Vice Provost of International Affairs at FDU, and Kyle Kattelman, who is Assistant Professor of Political Science at the Metro Campus. Today, we are going to talk about who's who and what's what at the United Nations. So, Jason, if I can ask you to begin and give us a brief history of FDU and the United Nations relationship.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Kyle, and all of you who have joined us this afternoon. I am Jason Scorza. I'm the Vice Provost for International Affairs at Fairleigh Dickinson. And in that capacity, it is my honor and pleasure to work with the United Nations quite in depth. FDU's relationship to the UN dates all the way back to 1945. And you may recall that FDU itself was founded in 1942. In 1945, our president, then President Peter Sammartino, actually attended the opening session and signing of the United Nations in San Francisco. At the time, he recognized this new, somewhat upstart organization as an entity that would have an important historical role in world affairs. When UN headquarters opened up in New York City, President Sammartino began to invite diplomats and other officials to come to FDU in New Jersey to meet with students, to give lectures, to speak, and also to teach. In those days, we would actually send a student across the George Washington Bridge in their own car to pick the diplomats up at UN headquarters. Today, fortunately, we're not obliged to do that. And of course, this semester, we will be doing all of our UN programming in this modality via Zoom. After sort of the founding period of the United Nations, FDU has continued to be closely involved. We are affiliated with the UN in no fewer than 5 formal ways that I can think of. We are an accredited non-governmental organization with the UN Department of Global Affairs. We are a non-governmental organization accredited by the Economic and Social Council of the UN, which Professor Kattelman will tell you much more about. We are accredited by the UN Academic Impact Office, which is a program that FDU helped launch at the UN. And it enables universities, not just in the New York area, but all around the world, to participate in UN activities, initiatives, and events. We are a member of the United Nations World Tourism Organization, and we are also a member of the UN Global Compact's, I don't remember what it's called exactly, but it's the program that promotes ethical conduct in business. Since I've been around FDU, at least, we've had more than 300 UN speakers come to campus. We're going to have quite a few UN speakers coming to join us via Zoom this semester. And Ms. Ferraro will tell you all about that a little bit later. But for now, I think I should shut up and let Dr. Kattelman get on with the business. Dr. Kattelman is a professor of political science here at FDU on the Metropolitan Campus. He has taught courses, including Intro to the United Nations, as well as some classes that I used to teach. including political theory and ethics of public affairs, and he's quite knowledgeable in the realm of international organizations and international institutions. So without further ado, Kyle, I'll invite you to take over from here.
All right, thank you, Dr. Scorza. Hello, everyone. Yeah, like you said, I do a lot of research in the area of international institutions like the UN. It's a very broad institution with a tremendous amount of ambitious goals. And so I teach an entire course on it. So over the course of 16 weeks, I talk about the UN, and there's still more of it to talk about. But I have a very short window. So what I'm going to try to do here, and I have a little presentation pulled up, is kind of give you the idea of what the UN originally tries to do, or what it was formed initially to do, and then kind of show how that has evolved over time. And then I'll go over the principal organs of the UN, essentially the different type of institutions within the United Nations that they use to try and achieve a lot of their ambitious goals. So we'll start with essentially what the United Nations is from a very basic building block structure. It's an intergovernmental organization, an international organization, otherwise known as essentially just an international organization. And this is a very specific type of organization, be it that the members are individual states. So in order to be a member of the UN, you can't be an individual, you have to be an actual country that's recognized by the international community. So that's what it means to be an international organization. So the members are comprised of sovereign states, about 191, 92, 93, give or take, how the international community recognizes them. But that's about the size of the membership. It was formed, as Dr. Scorza says, in 1945 after World War II. After the failure of a similar organization, maybe you learned about this in junior high or high school history class, the League of Nations. And so the League of Nations was designed after World War I to prevent World War II. Well, World War II happened, the League of Nations dissolved, and the international community came together and tried to rebuild the League of Nations into something much more broader, much more ambitious, with the renewed effort to prevent a World War III. And the reason why we have these types of organizations is because the international system in which we live is characterized by anarchy. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's just chaos everywhere, because at any one point in time between any two particular countries drawn randomly from a hat, it's not global warfare. And so, war is a relatively rare event, but it happens enough that we need to come together to prevent it from happening. And in a system of anarchy, it just means that there's no international government, that there is no actual legally binding entity that can force states against their will to do things that they don't want to do. So the UN is the next best thing. It tries to restore some coordination to a system that's inherently anarchic, although it doesn't have any legally binding mechanisms to do that. So, it's a big collective security organization with some very lofty goals. What it tries to do, and I'll read you some of the charter. Chapter 1, Article 1 outlines the goals of the UN to maintain international peace and security, and to that end to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace and for the suppression of acts of aggression or other breaches of the peace, and to bring about by peaceful means and in conformity with the principles of justice and international law, adjustment or settlement of international disputes or situations which might lead to a breach of peace, all right, to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace, to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, humanitarian character, and promoting all and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion, and to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in the attainment of these common ends. That is their stated goal, which is a mouthful, and that's just Chapter 1, Article 1 of what the UN wants to accomplish. In a nutshell, however, what they are is a collective security organization, which is sort of similar to an international alliance with another country. But a collective security organization is an organization that is put in place to facilitate cooperation amongst their members. So they form in response to different kinds of interests, but for the sake of the UN, their overall interest is to prevent conflict. And they're different from an alliance. So an alliance forms when two or more states have some sort of common interest against a common adversary. So for example, in World War II, Great Britain, France, and the United States formed a common alliance against a common enemy of Germany, Italy, and Japan in World War II. This is a little bit different. A collective security organization presumes that all states have a common interest in preventing conflict, and all states are in this thing together. So the UN isn't banded, isn't a unity or an alliance of one set of countries against another set of countries. They're all in this together. And the common interest they assume that every country wants is the prevention of violence and conflict. Now, originally when this was put together after World War II, the goal was to prevent interstate conflict. So that is conflict between different countries, outright war between different countries. But now it's expanded to include intrastate conflicts. So things like civil war, when a government goes to war against its own people. And then even beyond that, it's extended into human rights violations like genocide, for example, or politicide. So the United Nations, again, is a collective security organization. That means that any internationally recognized state becomes a member. So the Organization of American States, the African Union, the Organization for Cooperation and Security in Europe, these are all regional organizations, and they're all subsumed within the United Nations. So it's a collective security organization for the prevention of conflict. But like I mentioned, the system is characterized by anarchy, and what that means is that there is no universal police. So that if you really wanted to disobey the United Nations, you could do so, but it still enforces some form of conflict. It just doesn't have a legally enforcing mechanism to do that. So how does an organization that doesn't have this authority manage to enforce cooperation? How does it maintain collective security? Well, there's a mechanism triggered when one state attacks or threatens another, or there's a big outbreak of domestic violence. If the UN determines that this attack or threat is a violation or a threat to international peace and security, everyone who's a member of the United Nations is called upon to act. So an attack against any one member of the United Nations is viewed as an attack against all, and everyone is called upon to coordinate their efforts to prevent violence from happening. They can do this in a number of ways. They could call on states to issue international sanctions or trade barriers, or they can actually advocate and call for full-on military action. So the idea behind this is that if I'm a state and I'm thinking, and I'm in a dispute with my neighbor, and I am thinking about attacking that neighbor state, I might want to rethink my objectives if I know that me invading this other country is going to bring about international sanctions, peacekeeping forces, and the rule of the entire world against me. It kind of alters the decision-making process in me deciding to attack my neighbor. This collective security organization also has other mechanisms that prevent violence. It can act as a mediator to states, a neutral third party, and it can also deploy peacekeeping troops, which I'll discuss their roles here in a minute. But collective security organizations like the UN basically influence the interaction between adversarial countries in three specific ways. They are essentially an outside enforcement, an outside, a threat that, again, if I invade my neighbor, I might draw in the ire of the international community. So if I think that I can take my adversary on one-on-one in war, I might alter that if I have to fight against my adversary in 20 other countries. So that's one way to kind of deter international war. They can also enforce unbelievable commitments. So if I'm a state, I might be more comfortable in handing over my territory or ceding part of my territory to another country if I know that the United Nations is going to make sure that I'm not taken advantage of. And so we've seen this numerous times throughout history. One example of Israel leaving the Golan Heights and Syria vacating the Golan Heights after the Six-Day War in 1967. The United Nations inserted peacekeeping troops into that area to make sure that neither side tried to retake that area. So they can enforce unbelievable commitments. They can serve as neutral observers and peacekeepers. And so what a peacekeeping force does is it stands between, lightly armed, stands between two opposing sides. So if I want to carry out an attack against my adversary, I have to go through these peacekeeping forces first. And the idea behind that is that I might be reluctant to take out peacekeeping forces because it gives me a black eye essentially in the eyes of the international community. And they're essentially a neutral third-party enforcement mechanism. So how do they do this? Well, they're divided into 6 principal organs that carry out different aspects of the United Nations. So the first is the General Assembly. This is the only body in which all United Nations member countries are represented. The General Assembly exercises deliberative, supervisory, financial, and elective functions relating to any matter that's covered within the scope of the UN Charter. Its main goal is to function as a deliberative body where everyone can get together and discuss the issues of the day. And what it does is it makes recommendations, otherwise known as resolutions. And again, because this is not an international police force, these are non-enforceable. But by bringing countries together into a common area and having a common deliberative process, this kind of increases the probability that these countries are actually going to enforce these resolutions themselves. So it's a deliberative body that makes recommendations. The decisions are usually reached by a simple majority vote, but big issues like peace and security or a budget or admitting new members requires a 2/3 majority. And they convene annually in New York City. They just convened actually a couple days ago on Tuesday. And they pass around 350 resolutions a year. So this is the big one that, when they met on Tuesday, this is what they were doing at the General Assembly. The second is the Security Council. So the UN Charter assigns to this organ the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. It originally consisted of 11 members, which were 5 permanent members and 6 non-permanent members, but now it's 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members that are elected by the General Assembly for 2-year terms. And so these elected members are put in place to include diversity, the discussion of peace and security. But we have 5 permanent members, and these 5 permanent members were the winners of World War II. They're the United States, Great Britain, France, Russia, and China. And each member at the Security Council has 1 vote. So substantive matters, like an investigation of a dispute or the application of international sanctions, requires all of 5 permanent members plus 4 of the elected members to get anything passed. What this means is that any one of those 5 permanent members can veto a policy that, essentially the majority requests. And so these great powers, these winners of World War II, have a tremendous amount of leverage in what goes on in the United Nations. Anyone can bring issues to the Security Council table, even if they're not members. And if the Security Council finds a real threat to peace or aggression, they can call for diplomatic or economic sanctions. During the Cold War, because the Soviet Union and the United States both held veto power and they were at odds with one another, not a lot got done at the Security Council. But since the end of the Cold War, they've been able to function a lot more efficiently. Then we have the Economic and Social Council. This is the main venue for the discussion of international economic and social issues. It directs and coordinates the economic, social, humanitarian, and cultural activities of the UN. Much of this work is performed in functional commissions on topics such as human rights, narcotics, population, social development, science and technology, and the status of women. And as Dr. Scorza also mentioned, it grants consultative status to over 2,500 non-governmental organizations, Fairleigh Dickinson University included. They can serve as an advisory role, or they can function and provide information or testify at commissions on a specific area of expertise. And so they kind of run the gamut. They have 54 member states, and they pass things on a majority vote. Then we have the Trusteeship Council. This one has evolved considerably. It's designed to supervise the government of trust territories and lead them to self-government or independence. So before the UN, anytime there was a war or a conflict, to the victor went the spoils. So usually the winner would keep whatever territory it acquired in conflict. And so the idea behind that was to try to get this ambition of conquest off the table from the UN. So any territories or any colonial territories taken from defeated countries, this council was going to ensure that they would become independent and self-sufficient. Essentially the last country gained its independence in 1994. And so its role has expanded to administering the global commons, like the overfishing of international fisheries, or global common resources to try and mitigate the exploitation of those. And it's also a common forum for indigenous rights. Then we have the International Court of Justice, otherwise known as the World Court. It's the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, though it kind of got its original functions within the League of Nations. Their decisions are binding. However, states cannot be parties to a dispute without their own consent. So you don't go and bring, you're not required to come, you essentially can't be subpoenaed in the International Court of Justice if you don't want to. It's successfully arbitrated some cases. However, governments are reluctant to submit sensitive issues for fear of the International Court of Justice ruling against them. And again, since you don't have to be party to a dispute without your own consent, if it's an issue that a country really, really cares about and it thinks it might lose, it's not going to agree to be party to the International Court of Justice. And some countries, the United States included, outright refuse to acknowledge this court. But it is comprised of 15 judges elected by the General Assembly and the Security Council. And then we come to the last one, which is one of the most visible ones. This is the Secretariat, the Secretary General of the UN, and it's the principal administrative officer of the United Nations, and is elected for a 5-year renewable term by a 2/3 vote of the General Assembly and recommendation of the Security Council and all of its permanent members. So again, the permanent members with their veto power have a strong say in how the United Nations functions. These people usually come from small neutral states, and the Secretary General brings before the UN organization any matter that threatens peace and security. He is the chief spokesperson for the UN, the most visible and authoritative figure in world affairs. The current one is Antonio Guterres, and it's essentially a high-level negotiator and a high-level deliberator. So those are the 6 principal organs, and again, they were initially constructed to formulate this idea of coordination on preventing international conflict. However, as the UN has evolved, or as the international arena has evolved, so have the goals of the UN. So from 1945 up through the Cold War, the goal was preventing World War III, because during the Cold War, we were, in several instances, almost getting ready to get involved in World War III. Since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1989, the focus has then turned to civil war and everything that comes along with it. So genocide, human rights abuses, and then coming up through 2001, the administering of the war on terror and regulating human rights abuses within the war on terror. However, we've seen a very hard shift in recent years to a more holistic approach to international security, and that is best embodied in climate change and the fight against climate change, which is not a one single shot solution. The idea to fighting climate change and ensuring global security for all is best reflected in their most recent policy, the unanimously endorsed in 2015 Sustainable Development Goals. And so this is a 17-item list of objectives that are to be met by 2030. That includes addressing climate change, pollution, poverty, and hunger, and eliminating gender discrimination. All these things are bundled up together as a whole to ensure holistically international peace and security, not just interstate war, but peace and security for every individual on this planet. Unfortunately, and I'm sure this isn't a shock to many, in meeting a lot of these goals, more specifically climate change, we're not on track. So the goals of the UN are lofty, but enforcing this type of collective action is a very, very difficult prospect to do when the system is anarchy and any one state can choose whether or not to listen. But there have been progress made in certain fields, and this is the main forum where cooperation has the best chance of working. So that is a lot to cover in a small amount of time, but believe I got the main points. And so now I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Thank you, Dr. Kattelman. As I just recently put in the chat, after my session is done, we are going to open the event to a Q&A session for any questions that may be answered, and we will take the time. So you could ask your questions in the chat as my presentation goes along, and then afterward we'll take the time to answer them in order. So as I am given the presentation, feel free to begin asking your questions, and then we'll take the time to get them answered for you. So I'm going to open my chat. I have a little presentation as well. Let me just share my screen. So I am Ashley Ferraro. I'm the Assistant Director for the Office of Global Learning and Partnerships at FDU. A big part of my job is engaging these students and all our opportunities that we have available at the United Nations. So I'm going to talk as I can go over, okay? The first opportunity that we have as an NGO, as Dr. Kattelman had addressed, as an NGO of the United Nations, we have FDU has a lot of access for different opportunities and events and tours and conferences, and you name it, we are able to bring our students there. So it's a wonderful opportunity for our students to gain access to the UN. So one of the first things we do is myself as assistant director is coordinating the tours and briefings at the United Nations each semester. So with that, we typically like to arrange about 4 to 5 different tours and briefings throughout the semester. And with that, there's normally about 40 spots available. We have access to free transportation and everything that is open to students, faculty, and staff. And along with the tour and the briefing comes, it's a private tour of the United Nations given by a UN tour guide. That is typically about an hour. They go through all the different rooms and discussions of the different councils and their responsibilities, similar to what Dr. Kattelman did, but just walking along through the different rooms and such, so you can get to see the General Assembly and hear about all the different discussions that occur in these rooms and such. And as you can see right here is an example. I put some pictures to show what the tours are actually like. So as you can see, bringing some of our students there, you can see the tour guide discussing the peacekeeping operations and, listening to the different discussions that involves around the world of the peacekeeping operations. And then as you can see, again, another picture here of the General Assembly with our students touring through. After the tour is done, our students are then able to receive a private briefing given by a UN representative. These briefings, each topic varies depending on the visit. So some examples of the briefing topics we have done is human rights, climate change, as Dr. Kattelman and you have probably discussed in your UNIV classes, the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. So the UN representatives are able to speak with our students, engage with our students. Our students are able to ask questions, network. So it's a really great opportunity for our students to learn about different global issues and such. So for this semester, due to COVID and the situations that are currently occurring in the world, we have been able to work with the United Nations, and they have been able to open virtual tours and briefings for our students. So yesterday actually was our first virtual tour and briefing. So again, with the briefing comes, it's a virtual tour, so it's not, you know, you don't have the ability to walk through the UN, but it's a different way with what we have access to today due to COVID. So you're having a virtual tour, again, given by a UN tour guide, walking you through the different rooms and halls and such. As well as after the tour was done, then you again get a private tour given by a UN representative. So yesterday, as I mentioned, was the first fall UN virtual tour. The briefing topic was on human rights, and our briefing speaker was Tracy Peterson. She is actually the manager of the United Nations Remembering Slavery program. So it was a great opportunity for our students to discuss racism and human rights, and especially what's occurring today with the Black Lives movement, where our students were able to learn a lot as well as get into some serious great discussion about what is currently going on. So as I mentioned, along with the tours and briefings, the UN has a variety of different conferences that, as an NGO member of the United Nations, FDU is able, we have special access to bring our students to these private conferences. So as you can see, here are some pictures that I've gone to and that we've brought students to. Some of the UN conferences that I've mentioned that we've gone to is the J. Michael Adams Conference, which is held in November. Our FDU's president was Michael J. Adams, who had a big hand in the relationship between FDU and the United Nations. So with that, every November, the UN holds a conference in his remembrance, and each year we bring our students there to attend the conference and listen to the various speakers and such. Another conference that we were able to bring our students to was the celebration of International Day of Older Persons at the UN. This is held in October. Another one that is a huge conference that is held each year is the Conference on the Status of Women, held in March. This brings in over 1,500 people each year, and because we have the NGO title, we are able to bring our students as well as faculty and staff. They're able to engage in the different conferences that happen. It's about a 2-week conference. Unfortunately, due to COVID this year, it was canceled. Some events were moved online, but we're hoping again in March that they're able to reschedule it this year and we're able to have it in person, because it really is a wonderful experience for all. We actually even have such a big turnout that we have students that are able to act as volunteers for the events. So it's a great opportunity for our students to participate as well as network with different UN representatives. And another one that our students get involved with on campus is the Youth Assembly, which is held in February. So as you can see here, these are some pictures of the different conferences I've gone to: the Women's Conference, the J. Michael Adams Conference, and the Celebration of International of Older Persons Conference. So another big part of what we do as an NGO of the UN is FDU has the opportunity to connect with UN delegates and high representatives, and we call this program the UN NGO Pathway Forum. And with that, since we have these connections and we have access to these high representatives and delegates and ambassadors, we are able to connect with them and invite them to come to our campus and discuss participate in a forum that discusses various global topics. And it's a great opportunity for our students. We hold them between the Florham and Metro campus. You can see some pictures here of the various ambassadors and and high representatives we've had come to visit. So the forum takes place, they present to our students, and then afterwards we have a networking dinner that is in honor of the representative, that allows our students to network with the ambassador, meet them, ask questions, engage with them, learn about different possible, especially those that are interested in internship opportunities, network with them, shake their hands, learn of different opportunities that they might have available in their offices. Due to COVID, the situation right now, since the campus has not been open, we are moving all the events this semester virtually, but we do have a lot coming up, which is wonderful. So here's a list as in the presentation you can see of the upcoming events we have going on. So October 29th is Dominique Day. She's the chair of the UN Group of Expertise on the People of Africa. Then we have November 2nd, we have Melissa Fleming. She's the Under Secretary General of Global Communications. November 5th, then we have the Ambassador of Lithuania coming. And November 11th, we have the Ambassador of Spain. So again, all these events, everyone is invited to, and it's open to all that are interested in attending. We also have another part of what we do. Each event we do is recorded. So similar to like what we're doing today, this event is being recorded. So another aspect for those that are unable to join but are still interested in hearing the forums, we host, I put together our YouTube channel. Hopefully this will open. Let me see if I can share this. So you should see our YouTube channel that has just come up. So here is, if you are unable to attend an event, but you are still interested in learning and listening to the forum, you can come to our YouTube channel and listen to the discussions that had occurred. So see, here is all the different speakers and different topics that we've had. So each semester I'm able to gain the recording and upload it here. So for those that are unable to attend can listen or revisit the discussion. So it's a great place for those that are interested to take a look of all the different visitors we've had on campus, as well as the various topics that we've also listened to the speakers talk about. Back to the presentation. Okay. So as I had mentioned, we do a lot of different events focusing around the UN. Some people ask me, how do I learn about these upcoming events? These events are, of course, posted on FDU's calendar, so you can go there to look at it, as well as International Education has their own social media pages. So we have our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, as well as our weekly newsletter. So here on the presentation itself, if you wanted to, you can join our International Education email list by scanning the QR code and registering. And from there, you're going to be able to gain access. Okay, here we go. So this is what you'll gain access to. Hopefully everyone can see that. This is our weekly email blast. So you will receive an email from me each week with all the upcoming events we have going on. We have a large calendar of events coming up this semester, a lot of them UN related. So as you can see here, this is the UN tours discussed. So the next upcoming tour confirmed is Monday, October 5th. So you have the registration link. Once you're registered, a link will be sent to you. And you'll be able to gain access to the event. I'm working with the UN right now to gather to confirm 2 other dates in October and the beginning of November, waiting to hear back from them. So once those dates are confirmed, they will be announced and open to all to register. You have the event for today. You have a faculty event going on this Friday, as well as another cultural exploration event going on. So, and then down at the bottom, I normally like to post some news and different programs that focuses around the United Nations. So another one is the UN Young Professionals Program. So you can learn about, you have the video that you can learn about, as well as how to apply and such. And any questions that you may have, feel free to reach out to me and I can definitely assist you with that. And again, you have our different social medias, as well as here at the bottom, you have different UN virtual activities and resources that you can go through, you know, whether it's a virtual model UN game or discussion, you know, the SDG game, and different resources that you can use to further educate yourself about all that's available at the UN. And then some more resources around FDU's opportunities as well. So again, this is what you would receive each month if you're able to, if you register for the actual letter of email blast. So from there, you would start receiving this. So with that, I'm going to open the Q&A session. For any of those that might have a question, please use the chat to answer your questions and we'll take turns getting them answered for you. So the first question is by Stephen. Does the UN offer internships and scholarships? The UN definitely offers internship opportunities. They have a variety of different ways that you can learn about them. If you go into the UN website, you could go down at the bottom and you'll see a section that says careers. And from there, you can click and research a variety of different internships, locations, and see what is available. Any questions that you may have about that, please, again, feel free to reach out to me and I could better direct you there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for the presentation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions? Anybody else? Okay, no problem. So if you think of any other questions that you might, decide on, please feel free to email myself, Dr. Kattelman, Dr. Scorza, any one of us, and we'll be sure to get those answered for you. Again, any questions, if you see any activities coming up that you're interested in participating in, please know as a student, faculty, staff, anything that we do with the United Nations is open up to our community. Dr. Kattelman just put in his email address. I will include mine too in the chat if you need it. And I'm also including a link. If you can please complete this so we can better continue to improve upon our virtual events. If you can please complete the survey I just put in the chat room, that would be wonderful. Again, this year is new to all of us working on these virtual events, so we want to continue to improve upon them and make them better for everyone. Oh, is there a question? I teach the Gov 3202 class on the UN. If anyone is interested in registering for it in the future. Oh, that's Kyle. Okay, Dr. Kattelman, that is his class. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to him and he can give you more information on that. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Any questions you might have, please feel free to reach out. And I hope to see everyone again at some future events we have coming up this semester. Thank you again.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.